Welcome to Plimsolls to Platforms Episode 6. Join us as we profile the work of celebrity designer Marc Jacobs, savour some vintage treasures, and celebrate the street smarts of hip-hop artist Kanye West. Is it art or is it fashion? Designer to the stars Marc Jacobs consistently blurs the line with his sexy, playful collections for French luxury fashion house Louis Vuitton. The American-born artiste started creating and selling hand-knit sweaters while still at design school, where he won several prestigious awards. 2 years after graduating, Jacobs released his first collection and became the youngest designer to win the Council of Fashion Designers of America Perry Ellis Award for New Fashion Talent. As Louis Vuitton's creative director, Jacobs' collections are a not-to-be-missed fixture on the fashion calendar. His signature style is luxurious casual wear, such as silk shorts and monogrammed gym clothes. Listed by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world, Jacobs has eponymous boutiques all over the world, where lovers of luxury can indulge in his classic designs. But it hasn't been all smooth sailing for the fashion icon. In February 2008, he was accused of plagiarising a scarf design from 1950s Swedish designer Gösta Olofsson, a case that was eventually settled out of court. And in 2010, Jacobs filed a suit against clothing line Ed Hardy, alleged that its quilted nylon bag was too similar to one of Jacobs' designs. However, Jacobs has ridden out these storms and continues to open new stores and forge partnerships with fellow icons, such as Victoria Beckham, who wrote in Time magazine that the designer followed his own heart rather than following trends. His passion for popular culture infuses his designs with irreverence, colour and energy, Beckham said. He's not afraid to go against the grain and never feels the pressure to conform. And it's this individuality that has made Jacobs the darling of Hollywood, with Anne Hathaway, Courtney Cox and Winona Ryder among his acolytes. Yet the designer refuses to embrace celebrity culture, telling reporters that celebrities were banned from his fall 2010 runway show. He said he made the decision after Madonna crashed his previous show, diverting the focus away from his clothing. And for Jacobs, it always has to be about the clothes.
I mean, I never think that really a reference or an inspiration doesn't matter in the end. I mean, people are left with clothes. They either like them or they don't like them. But they are a catalyst for a creative team of people who every season we have to come up with new things to do and a reason to sort of get excited about doing them. So some of the references this season were, or among the references this season, were Christopher Atkins in Blue Lagoon, who of course is this, beautiful youth, shipwrecked with Brooke Shields, what could be more perfect. But the idea of summeriness, the idea of putting, sort of washing the clothes in water and then having them starched and then pressing them. So that was an inspiration for some of the treatments of fabrics and the mood for the sort of shorts and the wash silk shirts and things like that.
Jacobs is equally at home with women's clothing, and he's revelled in the opportunities presented through Louis Vuitton to design exquisite confections for discerning women. Stylist to the stars Rachel Zoe is just one of his many fans.
I just think Marc knows how to make a woman look sexy and chic, and that had Parisian chic written all over it, but yet Marc Jacobs meets Louis Vuitton meets it was art.
Vogue France also approved.
It was a very good show, very a lot of energy, very pink like the chairs. It's like for me the new Marquise des Anges.
Actress Mila Jovovich had an interesting perspective.
It really was. You know, as I was watching, I was thinking, you know, if Sheena E., Grace Jones, and Jackie O were one person and they were doing a shoot for Playboy, that's who that would be. That was that woman.
Discussing his inspirations, Jacobs revealed his love of form and fit.
Yeah, I mean, what we wanted to do was take big shapes and bring them into the body and then release them sometimes. So there was this kind of explosion of fabrics, you know, whether it was at a shoulder, it was at a wrist, it was at a calf, it was from the waist or the hip. There were like bubbles, you know, and I don't know, just everything we did, I feel, was like we took the fabric and we wanted to use more of it, so we smocked it up or we pleated it up or we draped it up. But it was all about this kind of control and release and joy, you know?
Jacobs has said, "I love taking mundane and comfortable things and turning them into the most luxurious things in the world." And this philosophy underlies all his collections. As his models saunter down the runway, the perfect cut and fit of pure couture is evident. Style that will outlive any momentary trends. In this way, Jacobs shows that fashion can truly be art. Wearable canvases that showcase a prodigious creativity. While some designers delight in the spectacle and ignore the wearability of their garments, Jacobs revels in finding a balance between classic, flattering fit and edgy design. It's been a long way to the top for this New Jersey boy, but it looks like he's going to be there for quite some time to come. In a reflection of global uncertainty, grunge has made a return to the catwalk. British designer John Galliano is just one of the designers who's turned to the streets as inspiration for their menswear collections. At Galliano's summer show, models emerged from spinning propeller blades to model clothes that appeared to embrace revolutionary fervour mixed with a steampunk aesthetic. Fashion writer Sasha Lilich said the designs had raw appeal.
We are beyond fashion politics here. We're more about letting it really all out, and we're going back to the age of creation. Give me champagne! And we are just basically, you know, in an age where things can be funny again, can be positive, can be upbeat. We play with colour, we play with madness, we play with mohawks. We use all the old codes that used to shock our parents, like punks and hippies and this whole Che Guevara la-di-da stuff, that to the kids of today doesn't mean anything.
Made up of mismatched elements like camouflage, army fatigues, and ripped, dirty t-shirts, grunge was once popular with disaffected youth who liked its low-maintenance, anti-establishment vibe. Now the joke's on them, with grunge fashion commanding high fashion prices. Perhaps the return to grunge is fueled by weariness with today's obsession with conformity and artificial beauty.
Socially, I really identify with the grunge era because I'm a rebel at heart, and I love that things just got blown to bits. All of the excesses of the 80s, the fanciness, the over-the-topness. And what's cool is we expand our concept of beauty at that point. So suddenly you don't have to be 6 feet tall. You can be Kate at 5'7", and you can be Alec Weck, and you can be Kristen McMenemy, and odd-looking and cool-looking. Irina Panteva. You can be all of these new forms of beauty.
Or is it Gen X's nostalgia for an era when rebellion was cool and individuality celebrated? Grunge was born as a musical revolution in the US city of Seattle, where groups such as Nirvana and Pearl Jam brought the garage band acoustic to the mainstream and made teenage angst acceptable. Nirvana lead singer Kurt Cobain unwittingly contributed to grunge fashion with his unkempt hair and dirty flannel shirts, inspiring many boys to reject personal grooming and embrace the thrift shop look. But it wasn't a conscious decision, with music journalist Charles Cross claiming that Kurt Cobain was just too lazy to shampoo. But in any case, grunge was a welcome antidote for 90s youth, who wanted something lower key than the flashy fluorescence of the 80s. So how do you wear grunge? Oversized flannel shirts are good, but don't choose too bright a colour. Individualise your jeans with rips, patches and drawings. For women, ripped fishnets and smudged mascara work well. Try combining a feminine dress with chunky Doc Martens. But above all, don't try too hard, as grunge is about doing your own thing rather than following the crowd. So perhaps buying an expensive John Galliano design kind of defeats the purpose. Once tucked away in parents' wardrobes and only brought out for fancy dress parties, vintage clothing has become both high fashion and big business. The seersucker suits and wooden platforms of yesteryear are now regularly glimpsed on the world's most fashionable people. From Julia Roberts' vintage Armani Oscars gown to Kate Moss's flapper dress, fashionistas are appreciating the uniqueness and sustainability of recycled fashion.
If you're snobby about wearing second-hand clothes, you're really missing out. Gems like this from the new look post-war, when austerity was over and designers had yards of fabric to deal with, are at a place like this.
Sometimes I just go to car boot sales, sometimes I have to go to auction houses, you know, it just depends.
And at the moment, what's the trend? Are people going to wear 50s stuff, 40s stuff?
The younger girls like the 80s. And the more mature ladies like the kind of 50s things and the 40s things, beautiful kind of semi-couture almost.
The advent of eBay and other online stores has fueled the passion for hard-to-find pieces.
And it doesn't all have to be vintage. This Nicole Fari trench coat is about 7 years old, but whereas it would have cost you nearly £300 then, it's about £45 today, and it hasn't dated at all.
Stores such as Resurrection are cashing in on the trend, although as owner Mark Hadaway points out, he's been in the business for quite some time.
Resurrection is a vintage clothing store in New York and Los Angeles that started in 1996.
Vintage fashion can be both a piece of art and a historical artifact that tells us much about the era.
I think really the most important thing about the collection is what it has to say about society. I think all too often we look at clothing and we think of clothing as being a disposable, transient, peripheral affair. But ultimately clothing is, in my opinion, the most fabulous and most precise manifestation of society. It's as beautiful and as perfect as a piece of pop music. It tells us exactly what we need to know about society at any given moment, whether it's optimistic, whether it's negative, whether it's embracing new materials, or whether it's retrospective and using historical materials. So with this collection that spans 40 years from the birth of avant-garde fashion in the early 1960s, for me its appeal lies in the fact that it really articulates every aspect of society internationally over 40 years.
One of the most exciting aspects of collecting vintage clothing is imagining who wore the clothes in their previous lives. Could it have been someone famous?
Both of these pieces were made for Sly Stone in 1972-73. This is the jacket worn on the cover of the album Fresh, and this is another piece worn on stage. You can see his initials on each shoulder. And those pieces came to me, were sold to me by a friend of Sly Stone's son.
Hadaway has now put his collection on the market.
Katie, my business partner, and I started putting this collection together when we started Resurrection about 12 years ago. And when we decided that it was time for us to sell the collection, we wanted to sell the collection in its entirety and present it as one collection. So that's when we started talking to Christie's.
Resurrection's collection includes such rarities as a 1930s leather driving jacket by Hermes, and Chanel boots, bracelet, and sunglasses. Each is absolutely unique and represents a slice of fashion history. With the greatest designers and most exclusive fabrics and jewels at their disposal, royalty has set the pace in the fashion world for centuries. From Elizabeth I's neck ruffle to Edward VII's Savile Row suits, kings and queens have wielded power and style in equal measure. When young Elizabeth II inherited the British throne in 1952, the United Kingdom was still recovering from its post-war privations. The coronation of the beautiful young queen was to be a symbol of renewal and a promise of future plenty. Along with her parents and the rest of the British people, Elizabeth had sacrificed much in the war years, including frivolous clothes. But with fabric shortages a thing of the past, women's dresses now epitomised 1950s abundance. Renowned designer Norman Hartnell created her coronation dress, a confection of silk and cream taffeta, reinforced with 3 layers of horsehair to shape the dress and make it light enough to wear. When she finally tried it on, the Queen had just one word to describe the dress: glorious. The shimmering design featured leaves and flowers symbolising the countries that make up Great Britain and the Commonwealth. The Queen's robe of state, made from crimson velvet, and her 7-pound crown was so heavy that she had to practice walking in them. As she matured, Queen Elizabeth always favoured British dress designers and craftspeople, and they responded with flattering designs. Today, the Queen approaches her 60th anniversary on the throne, and her signature style remains quintessentially British. She favours classic suits in impeccable wool, elegant hats, and always gloves. No matter what country she's visiting, Queen Elizabeth never looks out of place, and her wardrobe is carefully selected to suit both Her Majesty and her hosts. With the ever-dapper Philip by her side, Elizabeth fulfills her royal duties with a grace and dignity reflected in her carefully tailored ensemble. Well aware that she'll be the focus of all eyes and camera lens, the Queen often wears bright colours, adding contrast through a strategically placed brooch and smart handbag. In 1930, German siren Marlene Dietrich turned Hollywood on its head by appearing in a man's suit in the Joseph von Sternberg classic Morocco. She beguiled not just a young Gary Cooper, but a generation of women who enthusiastically discarded their skirts and stays for the liberation of tailored slacks. The establishment viewed this fashion revolution with great concern. New Yorker's magazine's Janet Flanner reported from Paris that Miss Dietrich is the first woman in man's clothing since Christina of Sweden about 300 years ago, on whom the government has again cast a watchful eye. "I dress for the image," Dietrich once said, "not for myself, not for the public, not for fashion, not for men." And the image of Dietrich in masculine suits and heavy-lidded makeup became one of Hollywood's most enduring. The diva's fashion demands were legendary. She insisted that makeup artist Max Factor use real gold dust to give her wigs extra shimmer in the movies. And her love of fashion was not confined to the screen. The gold-plated star had an extensive wardrobe containing classic pieces by Chanel, Ungaro, Givenchy and Edith Head. Dietrich stored her precious collection of shoes in a Louis Vuitton trunk under a grand piano in her Paris apartment. In figure-hugging gold lame gowns, into which she was sewn, and strategically placed pearls on her upper body, Dietrich was a striking figure throughout her long life. When her film career wound down, she toured the world as a concert performer, enthralling audiences with her throaty torch songs. Dietrich died in 1992, aged 90, and her personal effects, including more than 1,000 items from her personal wardrobe, were donated to a German film museum in Berlin. Grammy Award-winning rap artist Kanye West is considered by his fans and fellow musicians to be the classiest act in hip-hop. His musical arrangements are sophisticated and multi-layered, featuring such luxuries as an 11-piece string orchestra. And just like his music, West's dress design is eclectic, individual, and fashion-forward. According to Chip Diddy Chip hitmaker Jamal Noel Fife, West's fashion sense has changed hip-hop forever. "I don't wear skinny jeans," said Fife, "but he does and gets away with it. I respect that." West also earns respect for his sneaker collection, which is thought to number in the hundreds. In 2009, the hip-hop star teamed with iconic designer brand Louis Vuitton to release a range of sneakers. One pair featured a quilted flap on the back, inspired, West said, by the big padded collars worn by a character in the David Lynch film Dune. West has often combined fashion and art, collaborating with Japanese brand KAWS on a special edition album cover for 808s and Heartbreak, and wearing the famous KAWS original fake chompers scarf on several occasions. The scarf's bold graphic design perfectly suits the rapper's classic but funky style, a style that's as at home on the streets of New York as it is on the fashion runways of Paris. West even moonlights as a fashion writer for Complex magazine, a job that confirms his credentials as hip-hop's classiest act.